Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing and Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined with my co-host James. James, how you been? You good?
I'm well. Excited to talk some Cube.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a fun episode for everyone today. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing both a Cube review and also a bit of a level up in terms of Cube design. So let's all take you back to the start of the year when we received a nice email from a chap named Piotr. He was asking if we could do a Cube review for his friend Janusza's unpowered Vintage Cube. Now, me and James thought that this was a great idea, but because life gets in the way sometimes, we haven't really had a chance to get to it up until now. So today, we're firstly going to give a bit of a review of this cube and what we think about it, but then also we're going to look at it and see what we can learn from it. With any cube, there is always a bunch of decisions and choices that have gone into getting a cube to its current state, and you can really learn a lot about cube design by breaking a cube down and looking at these choices. So not only are we going to be discussing today what we like about the cube, we're also going to be talking about some important questions that any cube designer can be asking about their own cube to try and help improve their cube experience. And what makes this cube in particular so nice is that it's a cube that they've had together for a number of years now. So within it you can see how it's grown and how it's changed over time. James, let's just start with an overview. Kind of what type of cube is it that we're going to be looking at today?
Yes, this is a unpowered vintage cube. So we have all of the majority of the broken old cards, just not for power 9 plus, mana crypts, etc., which totally makes sense. But the lack of power does not mean there are not a lot of tremendously powerful cards and a lot of broken stuff to do in this cube. So we have, for example, full power reanimators here. We've got Entomb, Animate Dead, reanimate, all that good stuff. We've got a lot of really powerful standalone cards in here, stuff like Forfeilingus. And this is going to be a pretty unforgiving high power level environment. The decks are going to be pretty highly optimized and not something you're going to be able to hang around and not interact in. I'm expecting some pretty decisive gameplay here. But there's also certainly the really good interaction to line up with the threats as well here. So yeah, I think looks like a really nicely balanced cube power level wise, but with a few outliers as you'd expect. Stuff like Reanimate, stuff like Forfeilingus. There's potential for some broken stuff here.
Yeah, this is very much kind of my kind of perfect cube because while I love playing with power, this is kind of like the age-old conversation when it comes to powered cube. Of kind of like it can make the draft a bit less interesting. It's like, oh, there's an awesome build-around card, or there's just a Mox. Which do I take? With this, you kind of get with this, I feel that your choices matter a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yes, for sure. Also worth flagging up, this is a 450 card cube, which is a number we don't see a lot, but there's no reason we shouldn't. So obviously, if you're drafting with 8 players, you're using 360 of the cards. So you're going to see not every card, but the majority of cards in each draft.
Yeah, similar to the power level. Like the size of this, I think, is in that nice sweet spot because like as we kind of touch on it when we do our set reviews, and when I do that spiel at the start of each cube review of each cube review, we're basically if you have a 360 cube, if you're drafting that with your 8-person pod, you're seeing every card. With 450, you still get a nice bit of variety each time without having to go really, without having to take it up to that 540 to that 720 level. You get some nice variety, but you're not seeing the same cards every time. It means the draft is a little bit different. So I'm a big fan of going above the 360 mark, basically. And 450, importantly, does mean you can do a 10-person draft, which is a nice level.
Yeah, for sure. I think having a bit of flexibility in how many people you draft with is also a big benefit here. Like, if you could regularly get 8 people for a draft, then sometimes you'll have 10 people or 12 people who want to draft, and be able to spot that is quite nice.
I think, yeah, mine's a 540, and I think we've done 12 once or twice in the past 6 or 7 years. Does happen. But yeah, it is nice to have that ability of just not being up, or you don't have to turn your friends down. More is more, especially when it comes to cube. But James, talk us about some of the strategies. You mentioned some of the very broken ones, things like Reanimator, but talk about some of the other decks that kind of are available in this cube.
Yeah, so quite a lot of what we've got here is will be familiar to people who've drafted something like the Modo Vintage Cube in the last 10 years. It's so you've got white and red-based aggressive decks look very strong. But something we don't see in those cubes, especially the red deck, has quite an artifact-centric theme, potentially. That spills over into black as well. I think Rakdos Artifact Aggro looks like a pretty real deck here.
Yes, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, love a bit of Artifact Aggro. I've also got some nice Aristocrats-based stuff. Both, I think, as like a value-based Aristocrats deck, but also with some combo elements. Like you've got the Warren Soul Trader, Gravecrawler combo stuff, which is quite nice. We've got a bunch of blue-based artifact stuff as well, as you'd expect. And then we've got a few sort of classics of the that have maybe been power crept out of something like the Modo cubes. We've got like Splinter Twin to combo, which is cool. We've got, I'd say, some of the more like old school green cards, like the Fellows is in here with Kratos and all that good stuff, which I think can still be fine. It's we've discussed before the issues it can run into, but it can certainly have some strong draws. But overwhelmingly, like, there are not bad cards in this cube, so you're going to be able to put together something powerful in basically any color combination. Just some of them will be more synergistic than others. Like, we have a long list of stated archetypes. I'd say some of them are more real than others. Like, for example, Selesnya +1/+1 counters. Like, there are good Selesnya cards which put counters on things, but I'm not seeing like a ton of cards here which are paying you for having those counters that much. I think there's like the Ozolith, the green one is in here, but that's maybe about it. But yeah, overwhelmingly we're looking at good cards. There's a lot of different decks you can build here, which have a lot of synergistic potential. I'd say a lot of the most broken stuff, it looks like you can do centers around cheating big creatures into play. Like, we've got full powered Reanimator, but we've also got Flash, we've got Sneak Attack, we've got Show and Tell with all the good fatties. That if you're looking to do something busts in this cube, that seems like a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, we also have a channel for 3 big titans. We have 2 Emrakuls and an Ulamog in here as well for that channel payoff, which seems quite strong. I do like to see that. Yeah, just touching on something you said there. It's good to see no matter who the cube designer is, everyone's struggling to find out what to do with Selesnya, but it's fine. We will get there eventually. But yeah, just keeping the ball rolling, James. A couple of things that kind of stand out to me about this cube is that it definitely feels like a cube that's grown over time. Like in the email that we got, they kind of mentioned that this had been something that it's a labor of love. It's something that is kind of continuing to grow. And it does, from looking at the list, it feels like this cube has been drafted a lot. It feels like it's constantly evolving. Kind of like you already mentioned some archetypes and some themes that kind of like maybe have been crept out of the most powerful cubes, but still seeing things like Kiki Chiki's Splinter Twin. I mean, it's probably there because their playgroup likes it, and that's like, if your playgroup likes these archetypes, it is still a reason to keep them in. It keeps people playing. Some other classic cube cards that is really nice to see. That kind of like you don't see in the most powerful vintage cubes anymore, but when I think about the ideal of Vintage Cube, these are cards, but they might not be in there anymore. So things like Figure of Destiny is just a classic cube card. Things like Coalition Relic. Like seeing a Worn Power Stone and a Thran Dynamo in a cube in 2025, like, oh, that warms my heart, James. I love that. Cards like seeing like Rancor as well. I can't remember the last time I cubed with Rancor, but I love that card. It was in the first deck I ever had. And also, you touched on green was quite deep. There's a Plow Under in this cube, James. Let's go.
Plow Under's sick. I don't think Plow Under was ever really power crept. I maintain that card's busted. As long as your opponent hasn't done anything as rude as cast a creature in the first couple of turns, you know, just that small proviso. But Plow Under's great. Love a Plow Under. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's some really good old school bangers here. The Consecrated Sphinx as well is in here.
Yes.
You're like turn 3 1 Power Stone, turn 4 Consecrated Sphinx. It's over. It's over.
Proper magic, James.
No, I think there's a nice balance of that with the new stuff though. Like there's there's I'd be interested to see like how it plays in terms of like balancing those power levels. But yeah, there's this isn't to say it's like all old cards. There is a bunch of the powerful Modern Horizon stuff in here, and yeah, you've got your Orcish Bowmasters and your Barrogoyfs and your Forfeit Linguses. It's we're not lacking for powerful new cards either.
No, exactly, and yeah, it's definitely a cube that is being up to date, or that's being kept up to date, and they're trying new cards, which is something I'm always doing. I am really bad at just like not tinkering with a cube. Like every time we meet up and play, I feel like I have to change 10 cards, otherwise, what's the point? I think I've submitted the same cube list like once in the past like 5 years. It's not great. Don't do that. Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, I think we're probably on sort of different ends of the extreme here. Whereas I'm good at tinkering with the list on Cube Cobra, but then bad at actually doing the admin of getting the cards and making the changes before we cube. Yeah, I think it's I'm personally in favor of like I tend to like sort of one big update every 6 months or so, because I definitely get where you're coming from, where you feel like, oh, I don't have the cards from the new set that came out a week ago, so we can't possibly cube this weekend.
There's no physical way of doing it, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like in reality, people just want to show up and play cube, you know. There's
that's true. Yeah,
no one's actually fussed if you have the new slightly better white 2-drop from the new set.
I've got a bit better. I've started proxying them just like from a printer rather than like waiting a week and buying them all. So that's at least a plus. I now only buy the ones I know are good, not the ones that are expensive and I don't know are good. So that's a plus.
That is progress, yeah.
But no, but like what I was touching on about just seeing this cube being played a bunch. Because like there's a bunch of cards that kind of like I have played with over the last couple of years that I'm glad to see here. So like Rampaging Ferostodon is in this cube. Like, was that banned in Standard, James?
Bizarrely, yes. Sort of without ever being that good. I think.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was okay. It was one of those where they were banning a bunch of stuff from other archetypes, and then thought after they'd done that, mono red was going to be the best thing. So they sort of preemptively banned Ferostodon, I think. Was that
not around the time of Goblin Chain Whirler, though? I thought, was it that mono red deck? They do kind of blend into one, the mono red decks in Standard, a little bit.
Yeah.
Like,
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was like the Ramanap Ruins mono red deck, you know?
It's Ixalan, so it might still be in Standard at that time. That would probably be about right. But yeah, like
tell us we're wrong in the comments.
Yeah. There's a bunch of other cards like that kind of they've clearly tested and tried over the years, and the ones that the playgroup have liked has stayed in. That's really nice. So you have like Archangel Avacyn in here. That's a really cool one. I like that. That is a really cool card, but just one you don't see as much anymore. Like Search for a Scanter. This is a sick card, which kind of like it was one of the first cards I bought when I was going to put my cube together, because it was a powerful card in like I think it was a powerful card in Standard at the time. That was like, I'm building a cube, this goes in. Good to see that one is still there. It is a very cool engine, and it is something you can. It's a bit of a slower card, but in an unpowered cube, you do have a bit more time, so it's nice to kind of see that there.
Yeah, for sure, and it's nice that it is a generically powerful card, but also one that you can optimize. You know, it's I tend to find those lead to more interesting drafting experience in the long term than just cards which are generically powerful on their own and are basically the same power level in every deck. Like Search is a lot better if you have a bunch of fetch lands and a bunch of ways to mill yourself and you flip it much earlier. Like there will be decks in this cube that are regularly playing Search on turn 2 and maybe flipping it on turn 4. If you just put it in a generic blue deck, that's not going to be the case.
No, nice, very strong. But yeah, also then there's cards from the brand new set. So our last episode was the cube set review. We have a couple of Edge of Eternities cards in here. We see like Lightstall Inquisitor, Umbral Collar Zillet, the free sack outlet, which I'm really hot on. Cavern Harrier, the cheap red aggro creature, and then Ice-Till Explorer, which is a card I did buy 2 of. Because I have at least 2 things that need it.
Yeah, that checks out. I think that's my favorite card from the last set, actually. It seems really powerful.
Yeah, one copy is going in my cube. I have 2 copies, and I think I need them technically both for both cubes. I might not update the treat yourself one for like an extra couple of months so I can play it in Commander a couple of times at least first. Hey ho.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I do get the sense of this cube that Janusza does want to be testing new things. Like for me, it's cool to keep a cube fresh, but that does make it tricky. It is hard keeping track of a cube over over a number of years, as this cube has been. Like keeping the right number of like aggressive creatures in this color or cheap creatures in this color, or like keeping the curves relevant and keeping things on track. It's very tricky, and it does seem that kind of like it's really nice to see a cube that feels like it's had this fluid, natural growth. But if you look at the underlying numbers, everything is still good. Like the curve of the cube still looks good. There looks to be a healthy number of like 1 drops, 2 drops, and 3 drops. This kind of stuff. There's like ramp. There's everything that you want to see from a cube, while they're also trying new things and can have callbacks to like cool stories they had from a couple of years ago. So as a fellow cube enthusiast, this is a really nice cube to look at.
Yeah, seems like it's evolved really well, and still looks to be really balanced across different archetypes, which can be, generally that comes about. A big mechanism for that is you're getting feedback from your play group as well, right? It's not just about your personal experiences of the cube as a designer. It's about listening to your play group, because different people will draft your cube in different ways, and you want it to be a fun experience for all of them. And this cube definitely looks like it would be a good experience for a lot of different players, right? Like there's more intricate there's more intricate decks that you can draft, but there's also some like pretty straightforward decks to draft. And it looks like it would be a really fun cube for basically any sort of player to jump in with.
Right, so that's a nice overview of the cube. What we're going to move on to now is more like the level up part of the episode. And basically, we're still going to be going through the cube, but we're going to be kind of like highlighting things that we think are either interesting or like are decision points that the designer has made in order to get the cube to where it is now. Hopefully, you got like these are questions that me and James will have asked ourselves when we're putting our own cubes together. And hopefully, by us pointing out these questions, these are things that you can ask yourself on your cube to kind of help improve the environment and help generate this. Again, we're talking about this cube not just because we got a nice email, but also because we do think it is a cool and interesting cube that's designed well, and you see that growth has that cool story about it. So one thing that is in the description of this cube is that there are no proxies. Now, this is a pro-proxy podcast, but I do understand this choice. Kind of, James, how do you feel? Like, what's your thoughts on a cube that doesn't have any proxies in it?
Oh, yeah, I think it's really cool to build a cube like this without proxies. It's like something you're personally passionate about. I think it's great because also a cube like this, which has existed for a really long time, is also kind of a extension of you building your Magic collection, and like the cards themselves can have a lot of nostalgia value, right? Like, so yeah, I think it's awesome building a cube like this without proxies. Like, it's like a really big commitment. I probably wouldn't recommend to someone who didn't own any of the cards to go in and just go and buy all these cards in order to build a cube without proxies. But if you're in a position where you already own a bunch of the cards and it's something you want to do and that is important to you, then I think it's great. Yeah, and I think it's it can be worth making some small concessions, and they are small concessions. Like there's not a ton of cards you would put in this cube that aren't here, I think, for like expense reasons.
Mm-hmm. One thing you really touched on, like it is a extension of the cube designer. Like the cards you choose to go in your cube are also a reflection of you. Like a bunch of the cards in this cube are tagged with the word altar, so you would assume there's cool altars in here. And like I definitely had this thing when I built my cube. Like I don't need the Bob Ross Evolving Wilds in my cube, but I wanted it because I thought it was cool, and it was a choice that I got to make, and it kind of like, oh, I like that. That reflects me. Like if you're the biggest Final Fantasy fan, then maybe you want all the Final Fantasy cards in your cube, all those versions. That's cool. If that reflects you, then you are doing it correctly, I think. And that is one thing that comes with choosing to be proxies or not, is that there are less and there are more options for proxies, if that makes sense. Like you are kind of working with the archive that already exists online.
Yeah, I think a big part of why the reason to build a cube like this without proxies, right, is to partly to like scratch that collector itch as well, right?
Hmm.
Like if like Magic is a collectible card game, and I think most Magic players are somewhere on a spectrum between like there are a bunch of people who just collect Magic cards, right, and don't really play the game
Hmm.
that much. And there's a whole spectrum between that and um, basically only interested in playing the game and don't really care about a collection, which is basically where I'm at actually. If
Yeah,
if I could sign up for like mana traders, but
in
for
paper.
paper
Yeah.
cards, where someone just gives me the card where I need to put it in a cube or a deck and then takes it away when I'm done, I would sign up for that in a heartbeat. But if you're into the collecting side of the game, then having a cube like this built without any proxies and having like really unique artworks and altars and stuff, that's an awesome way to do the collecting thing, because you're actually building something that people are getting you a ton of use on, gaining joy from your collection. Like that's way cooler than just having a collection that sits around in a binder.
No, yeah, I fully appreciate that because, like, yeah, like in my main, like in the two cubes I currently have, I have alt arts, I have fancy versions, and I have proxies. But I am currently working on a third cube because it's not enough. That is going to be all real cards, no proxies, but it's like an old bordered cube. It's like a pre-8th edition old bordered cube that I'm putting together. Partly because it's the nostalgia thing of like these look like Magic cards from when I was a kid. So like I've made the decision not to put proxies in there because I want them to be the old cards. I don't want them to be printed before a certain date. That's kind of like a thing I put on myself. And kind of like it's I'm partly doing that because the cards make me feel in a certain way about them. I look at them and it's like, I'm a kid again. These are the first cards I got from a car boot sale, that kind of thing. It's kind of like that kind of feeling is what I'm going for with this cube. So yeah, I can fully appreciate kind of if you don't want to if you want to have proxies, cool, crack on. If you don't have proxies, cool, crack on. Do you? But I guess the flip side that does come with not proxying is that it does mean that some cards you might not have just because they are stupidly expensive. Like there's a very strong mono green deck in here, but there's no Gaia's Cradle. That's probably just because Gaia's Cradle is what, like 800 quid now? It's a very expensive card now. It might not be worth it for just one card to go out and get it. Fully appreciate that. Same with things like Mox Opal or Survival of the Fittest. Like these are cards that kind of just have gone up in price massively over the last couple of years because they're reserve list. We can't see reprints of them. We also don't have things like Wheel of Fortune and Time Twister, and those ones a bit more in particular. Like cards like Gaia's Cradle are good in like the mono green deck, but the mono green deck can still exist. Whereas cards like Wheel of Fortune and Time Twister mean that kind of like you can't have the wheel deck existing as much. Like there are more budget wheels, but just from a like competing with everything from power level wise from this cube would mean that the budget versions probably won't cut it. Because like initially I saw this and thought like, oh, Shield Druid, the Apocalypse might be a bit of a power outlier. But then when there's no Wheel of Fortune and no Time Twister, that makes it a bit more reasonable from a power level point of view. Like do you agree with that, James?
Yeah, for sure. I think most of the things we flagged here that are presumably like not here because of costs, I think are not cards that like disqualify an archetype, right? The archetype still exists. I think the one archetype that is pretty hard to do without these super expensive cards is Storm. Because I mean, firstly, like Lion's Eye Diamond is a stupidly expensive card,
Mm-hmm.
and that's if you're building a Storm deck, and obviously we don't have like Lotus and stuff, then the Diamond is kind of essential, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the wheels also are very expensive. But the thing is, you just design around that, right? Like there's a ton of scope in a cube like this of ways to design it. There's a bunch of interesting combo decks you can build that aren't Storm and don't require you to spend 500 quid on Lion's Eye Diamond, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not a huge design constraint. You just have to bear in mind what your limitations are as you're designing the cube.
Exactly, and that we're not saying that a Storm deck can't exist in a budget cube. It's more we're saying that this is a very powerful cube, and the version that would compete in this cube is quite expensive.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want the Storm deck to be able to compete without like Wheel of Fortune, Lion's Eye Diamond, then you'd have to not have Forfeit Lingus and Pyrogoyf in the cube, right?
Exactly, that makes sense. let's move on to another design choice that we're kind of seeing in this cube, and that is that there's a lot of redundant effects. And I don't just mean that there's like a lot of lightning bolts and a lot of like doom blades. Like we have things like we see like 2 copies of like there's Deep Cavern Bat and Kite Sail Freebooter. These are both 2 black mana creatures that do some hand attack. Like we have both Adeline Resplendent Cathar and Brimmer's King of Oreskos. They're both 3 mana white token makers. There's 14 green ramp effects, 8 at 1 mana. There's 5 1 mana white 2/1s. There's 8 aggressive red 1-drops. There's 4 Blood Artist type of effects. And what this will mean is that the decks that these cards go in will come up more regularly. By having this level of redundancy, you are going to see these decks appear more regularly, and they will be more consistent because the pieces are always going to be like this is a 450 cube, so not every card is going to be opened, but there's going to be a good chance you are going to see a decent amount of Llanowar Elf variants in this cube, like in a draft. Like you won't see the same cards every time, but you're going to see similar cards every time. That is definitely a choice that they have looked at making by basically they have said we want these decks to appear and we want them to appear regularly and be supported.
Yeah, for sure. And it gives you the confidence in the draft, right? If you've identified that green is open, but you don't have the 1 mana accelerants yet, you can kind of draft assuming you will get a couple of them at some point. Because your green deck would look very different, right? If you assumed you were getting, say, 2 1 mana accelerants versus not, then the way you, and like how many tap lands you play is different, how many frees you can realistically play is different. And having that critical mass in there means that you can like pretty reliably make the assumption that if green is pretty open and you're not fighting for them, then there'll be a decent number of those 1 mana accelerants opened. And yeah, same logic applies. You say for like the white 1-drops, for example, it makes mono white a real thing, right? But you're going to be able to reliably start on 1. Is a very different proposition to an aggro deck that starts on 2.
I'm not sure if this is a great way of describing it, but like it feels roomy, if that makes sense. Like my cube is kind of the opposite of this. My cube feels at times very constricted, and what I mean by that is I don't have anywhere near as much redundancy in effects. So in the draft, in mine anyway, I definitely feel like I don't want to say the picks are harder, but it's if you don't take that Llanowar Elves, then you might not see another one, if that makes sense. Whereas in this, it's different play styles. It's what your cube group likes. But in this, it does feel nice to kind of like you maybe in this cube and I'd like your opinion on this, James. Do you think you can stay open longer in this cube if you just because there's more redundancy of effects? So kind of you don't have, like there's more bread and butter pieces for a deck. So kind of like you can wait a bit and kind of like when you see a signpost card, you can take it, but then you still have more redundant effects coming afterwards. I feel in mine sometimes, and maybe I'm just not as good a drafter as some of our other people, but basically I get into my archetype and then kind of like the good cards are already gone, if that makes sense. Like there aren't as many kind of like, or like bread and butter cards in my cube. Like, is that a fair statement?
I do see what you mean. It's an interesting question. I think a lot of the reason, I think you definitely could stay open a long time in this cube. A lot of the reason is that I think compared to something like your Treat Yourself cube, there are not a lot more cards in here which are just generically good, right? Which I think is like a pretty deliberate choice in your cube that the cards are very contextually powerful or not, right? But, looking down, for example, the black cards got like Orcish Bowmasters, Deep Cavern Bat, Dauthi Voidwalker. These are not cards you have to be that are good in a specific deck or a specific color combination. These are just powerful cards which are going to be good whatever color you pair them with. So it allows you to, for example, I take like 5 black cards at the start of a draft. Maybe I pick up a couple of blue cards and a couple of red cards in the rest of a pack, and I can, and going into pack 2, I just know that I'm black and I don't I've not decided on my other color yet, and I can make that. I can push that decision further down the road, which is nice, and it gives you it. It means you have a lot of agency in your draft, right? It means you're not just planting your flag early and hoping that it's open. You actually get to figure out what's open, which is a pretty good place to be. Not to say I think you can't do that in something like your cube, but it's it can be. You sometimes have to be quite inventive to make it work in cubes where the cards are a bit more contextual, because you end up like trying to find uses for the card, for specific cards in places which aren't their natural home, right? Which
That's
can be like, which is, I think, a good thing as well. But it's it is different experience than just being like, I have 6 black cards, they're all great, basically in every deck, so it doesn't matter, right?
No, I think that's fair. It might also be the curse of the cube designer, where it's like, this archetype is open, I'm going to do exactly this archetype, and then you don't take any good card. I'm definitely guilty of like, I'm going to show them that this is a good archetype, haha, and then I go
this time Celestia counters will work.
No, James, you know it's madness. You know with me it's madness. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Yeah, for sure.
Golgari Grave Troll will win a cube at some point. Don't worry about it. But I do want to kind of keep the ball rolling. But like one other thing that kind of we have seen just from the cube list is there does appear to be fewer fixing lands than you would tend to see on average of a cube of this size. So whenever you are looking at a cube, one of the first things to look at is the mana base, kind of like what lands are you working with. So generally in this cube, we see for each color pair, we have 3 lands. We have Fetch, Shock, and Surveil land, I think, all the way down. We do also have a Celestial Colonnade, but that's more of an Azorius card in this. It's like a control win con. We then have a full cycle of Triomes, because Triomes are great. And then the standard kind of Mana Confluence, Prismatic Vista, kind of 5 color lands, that kind of stuff. James, as someone who I know loves drafting his lands, kind of like, if you saw this land spread available to you before you started drafting, would that change the way that you are going to go into the draft?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is saying to me that if I want to be more than 2 colors, then I'm going to have to take the lands pretty highly, because there's fewer lands relative to the size of cube than you'd see in a lot of cubes, right? Like, I think my cube, I think my 540, I think I'm on 6 in each color pair. So to scale that down to a 450, that would be 5 or at least 4. So this is at 3 at each color pair. And I don't think this is a bad thing. I think it's just, but I think it is something you would have to take into account as you're drafting, because you still have a bunch of color intensive cards, right? So you're going to need some lands to make your 2-color deck work most of the time. It means that if you're a really aggressive deck, you being 1 or 1 and a splash is probably really good. And if you're a more interactive deck, then trying to keep it to 2 colors or 2 and a light splash is probably where you're going to want to be a lot of the time. So in the draft, the way I'll be thinking about this, right, is if, say I start off with like a good blue card, a good red card, into a good black card. In some cubes, I might be thinking, it can be like a Grixis control deck. In this cube, I'm probably thinking I'm going to be 2 of those 3 colors, right? And less likely to splash unless it's for something really powerful, or unless I just get a lot of lands. And listen, it's not like there aren't lands, right? If you're prioritizing the lands and the other people aren't, then yeah, I'm sure you can play a lot of colors. But I'm expecting that in most drafts, you're going to be fighting for the lands, and maybe you can be like 2 and a splash, but you're not going to be drafting a ton of like 4 or 5 color decks. I would expect in this cube. I think the only exception to that I'd say is maybe if you're heavy base green, because there are quite a lot of the dorks that give you access to multiple colors. So maybe you can do something in that space. But obviously, if you're relying on them for fixing, it is somewhat fragile. if they lightning bolt your Birds of Paradise and then you don't cast any more spells because you don't have access to colors, that might be a problem for you. It's very rude, but people do it.
I guess one thing that might have led into that choice of only having 3 dual lands in each color is that in this cube, it does look like monocolored decks are supported. Like mono red aggro is one. The first line of text of strategies available is mono red aggro. We also have a mono white aggro deck. We have blue artifacts. We have a black control deck, and we have green ramp. It does look like it's kind of like a limited environment where basically like a lot of kind of the best way to describe it is kind of like a lot of vintage cube right now is kind of like Khans. You can it's 3 colors is kind of free, if that makes sense. Like to an extent, there might have been a choice made when designing this cube to be no, I want to support monocolored decks more than 3 and a splash colored decks, if that makes sense. That's more important. And like at that kind of framing, 3 lands per slot does kind of make a bit more sense. Or to me anyway, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I get it. Because I think as well, the addition of all the very powerful threats we've had with like Modern Horizons and Lord of the Rings and everything has just naturally led to people playing more colors because there's more really powerful stuff you want to splash. And I think one way you can push back against that is saying, okay, but we're going to make it harder for you to splash, right?
I quite like that. I quite like that.
I think that's cool.
I'm kind of on board with my Dimir control deck not being able to splash 4th Aerlingus James.
I mean, I'll still try.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's reasonable.
But I do like that. Like it. If it's a choice to just not make the mana as free to kind of stop because like I've been afraid of the soup decks for ages, and like one of the ways I stopped it was just I cut 4th Aerlingus, I cut a bunch of different cards to kind of stop the soup deck from just being the strongest thing. Maybe double fetch shock triome duel is not the most like cutting that might have been another way to do it. So that is an interesting thing to kind of to consider from this cube. So yeah, that's very cool. Another choice that they've made, and I think I'm getting more and more on board with this, is there is no talismans or signets. Now, when I first put my cube together, it was all cubes or like all powerful cubes have to have a full cycle of signets, and that's only because we don't have the full cycle of talismans. Then they completed the full cycle of talismans, and it's like every cube has to have the full cycle of talismans. I've kind of gone down in my cube, in my regular cube, to just having talismans in the colors that care about artifacts. But there is a question of like, do you think talismans and signets are both too slow nowadays?
I think in a cube like this, I would say there are plenty of decks that would play on-color talismans or signets, but certainly not every deck, right? Yeah, I could see an argument for maybe just putting in a couple in this cube. Because we say like the decks that care about artifacts, but in reality, right, like the Rakdos artifact deck in this cube probably actually doesn't want talismans, right? Because it's trying to be aggressive. But maybe like the blue-red deck does. So I could see like a blue-red talisman being a thing that you want. But yeah, we certainly don't need to have the full cycle of 10, I think, because we are just kind of past the point where 2 mana accelerate, like where you're playing them regardless of the colors, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not fussed about the colors, then you can put in something like Mind Stone, which we do have in this cube.
Yeah, I guess with our threats getting cheaper in a lot of sets, that you don't need to ramp to 3 or 4 because you get the same effect on a 2 or 3 drop nowadays. But I guess maybe the fixing aspect of the thing might be part of the decision with the lands of not having as many sources of fixing outside of green. That could be part of the choice to kind of to curtail those 5-color soup decks. So that could be part of it as well, because you like talismans and signets are fixing as well as ramp. So
yeah, for sure. So if you look at the mana rocks that are in the cube, they very much feel like they're you have to really mean it, right? Because they're like Coalition Relic, 1 Power Stone, Fran Dynamo. these are cards for a very specific deck. They're not cards for just trying to cast my powerful 4-drop a turn early.
Yeah, and you have Everflowing Chalice and Mindstone, but they're just both colorless mana. They don't help you with the fixing or anything like that, which I think does make sense. Talking of color, one thing I am a fan of seeing in this cube is there isn't really balancing for multicolor, and by that I mean there isn't like each color pair doesn't have the same amount of cards. Like we see, like Azorius has 5 slots, Dimir has 4, Rakdos 4, Gruul 2, Selesnya 2, and kind of like it's kind of in between the 2 and 4 mark the whole way down, but it's not the same amount. That's quite nice, and like that to me that is a cube that has grown to that point, because like I think the starting point for a cube is you have the same amount of cards in each color, and you have the same amount of cards in each multicolor to start off as an even base in each archetype. Just from a base point of view, every color has the same amount of resources there for it. But as you start playing the cube more, you're supporting decks more than colors. It kind of moves away from like limited draft to more like a meta, if that makes sense. And that's where kind of you're supporting decks more than you're supporting colors. And that's definitely something where kind of like Azorius as a control thing needs a bit more help. Let's give it an extra resource, that kind of thing. Selesnya just sucks, so let's just remove all the Selesnya cards, that kind of thing. You know what I mean, James?
Yeah, for sure. I stopped trying to balance the multicolor cards about half an hour into creating a list for my first cube, to be honest, because I'm of the opinion, right? And it's got to be reasonable, right? You can't just put in like 15 as it gold cards because they're all cool. But like you do have to respect the balance of the cube. But having said that, if like you have a color pair where there aren't gold cards that you're excited to put in your cube, then don't put them in just to make up the numbers. Just add monocolored cards to those colors that you are excited to put in, and maybe bias towards ones that you think would work well in that color pair, but they don't have to be literal gold cards, right? Like if you don't have good Selesnya gold cards you want to add, then put in a green card which you think works well in a Selesnya deck. Don't just like add them to make up for numbers, even though you're kind of not excited about them and they might not even see that much play.
100%. And it's just the thing that like not all color pairs are treated equally. There is a thing of like allied color pairs have traditionally got more over the years. I say this as a Golgari fan who's angry they haven't completed cycles of stuff, but it is just a thing of like there are more colors of certain cards than there are others to choose from.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason for this, right, is that we have in what we're doing in Cube a lot of the time with the gold cards is we're taking the gold cards from limited environments. And in limited environments, the gold cards are generally supporting the thing that color pair was doing in limited.
They're extremely signposty.
Exactly. And very often, and if you look at the recurring themes we get in limited sets, the ones that crop up in certain color pairs just convert very well to cube and are quite consistent. Like, how often is blue-red spells a thing? That's like every other limited set, right? And that translates really well to cube. Compare that to something like, black-red. I don't know. What was in the last limited set?
I didn't play any Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I don't know, like red-white vehicles matter or something, right? Vehicles matter does not translate well to cube because there just haven't been enough vehicle sets. Or like blue-green energy, there just aren't enough energy cards, so those gold cards are going to be a miss in cube. And that just leads to there are color pairs where they print gold cards like every other set, which look really exciting for cube, and there are color pairs where that isn't the case. Like, I think for me, it's always Izzet has so many cool good options, right? Because they have a bunch of great artifact builds around and a bunch of great spells cards, and often some like other kind of unique cards that just end up in Izzet. And something like green white, there's there's some counters stuff or there's some token stuff, but that's about it, right?
Like I think I could name like 50 banger Dimir cards, and I struggle to get past 5 Selesnya cards.
Yeah, for sure. And it's I think you don't have to try and force it, right? Having a balanced cube doesn't mean that every color pair is drafted an equal amount of the time. But secondly, how often that color pair is drafted is not just about how many gold cards there are. It's about the monocolor cards working well together far more than it's about the gold cards. So I'm not at all worried about the number of gold cards. My only thing would be you do need to exercise some discipline if you have 12 Dimir gold cards in your 450 card cube, then you maybe need to chill out and pick your 5 favorites, but it's fine to not have lower numbers for certain color pairs. It's not an issue, and I think.
It's definitely something nicer with having a larger cube. When you have a 360, every card, as we said, every card in the cube is being drafted. So I'm not trying to... I want to say that the larger the cube, the less rigid you have to be about balancing, because there is an element of randomness and things kind of working themselves out in the wash of there still being a third of the cards left in the box, if that makes sense. Like it's one of the things I like more about like the environments are generally more forgiving in terms of like for example, in mine, I think that there is a world where currently broadside bombardiers might be too strong. But because it's a 540 cube, in mine anyway, it's not appearing every draft, so it's not like train wrecking draft after draft after draft. That's something nice you can do with large cubes, and I think it's something that will probably come up with this one a little bit. Talking of unfair cards, James, we do want to touch on some of the unfair strategies that have been included in this cube. So we've already mentioned kind of full power Reanimator. We have Entomb. We have the best Reanimator targets in here. We have Archon. We have Grizzlebrand and Atraxa in no particular order. We mentioned them there. We mentioned we have Flash and Sneak Attack with all the best targets. So we have things like Worldspine Worm. We have
Woodfall Flymas as well.
Yeah, and we have
Triplicate Titans in there. Yeah, you've got most of the good Flash targets actually. It's like Botboard Tyrants in there. Even like Gruff Triplets Flash is pretty good actually. You end up with 2 6/6s.
It is nice, and yeah, I would touch on Channel and Rickle as well. But also we have Tinker, and we can go and get a Sundering Titan with that. You put a note in here, James, that you would like a portal to Phyrexia, maybe. I do like a portal with a Tinker.
I would like a portal to Phyrexia. So we have a Goblin Welder as well, right? So we have a few ways to cheat in our big artifacts.
Yes.
And I think it's cool if some of our ways to cheat stuff, if some of our unfair decks are not just different ways of putting giant creatures into play. And Bolas's Citadel's like a very...
The house is fun, yes.
Yeah, I would go Bolas's Citadel, I think, for the other thing to cheat in, because it's not game over. It's not like absurdly powerful. Like you can definitely tinker for Citadel and lose, but it is a really cool gameplay experience. It's you can do a bunch of really powerful stuff that feels really broken at the time. You can go off with like Sensei's Top is cool. You can basically draw your whole deck with that. You just pay a life to draw a card. I think it just it's nice to give have a wide variety of powerful stuff you can do in your cube, right? And stuff that feels very different. And I think at the moment, most of the combo-y stuff we have is basically different ways of putting a giant creature into play. And I think like having something that feels a bit different would be cool.
Yeah. I could imagine maybe the choice to not go Bolas is that you do normally think of it like as a Storm adjacent card, and because that's not supported in here, maybe that was a reason they didn't include it. But just Bonus Still is just quite a fun card. Like it can do dumb and broken things by itself, and we do have mono black kind of like control in here, and that is a nice kind of like top end alt win con of like I have lost games to the is it tap 10 permanents, deal 10 damage or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's a very real thing, and it's like actually kind of castable in some decks as well. Like just Dark Ritual, Bolus of Citadel on turn 4 is kind of a thing.
I think the house does fit in very nicely here because look, it also goes in with all of the other broken things that the cube is doing. But like, I do think the designer has found has done a good job at finding their power level. And this is something that every cube designer, no matter what the cube is, it could be Edge of Eternity's set cube, it could be Vintage power level. Like, finding the right power level for your cube is incredibly important because effectively you want everyone to have the same amount of fun and same amount of chance of having fun in a cube environment. And like, if one person's just bulldozering everyone every game because they have worked out what the best deck is and they can get it every time, that isn't the most fun experience. And I do think they've done a really good job at finding their power level. And how they've done that is like, firstly, we do have a list of banned cards. James, you want to go through the cards that they've listed as not being in this cube?
Yeah, for sure. So so these are cards that they flagged as being removed on power level, I guess. So Power 9 solving, yeah, absolutely makes sense. Oko Thief of Crowns. This is interesting to me. I wonder if this was sort of excluded a while ago, because to me, something like Broadside Bombardiers is, to me, a much more powerful cube card than Oko Thief of Crowns.
I'd agree. I think it's more fun, though. I think Oko is a bit more of a miserable card.
That's
which
fair.
Could be
That's
reason
fair.
behind it, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not to everyone's taste.
The next one I completely agree with. I think this next card is bullshit, personally.
Yeah, but they agree with you about Comet Stellar Pup by the look of it. That card is absolute nonsense. And things like Halftime's mediocre. The whole dice rolling thing sucks. If you've ever had your opponent chain together some sixes off that Comet,
I had one of our friends roll 2 6s. I can't entirely remember how the turn went because I think I had a mini aneurysm while it was happening at me. But I know they were doing a bunch of Comet Stellar Pup like 6s and going. But I know that basically the turn ended with them getting their Kiki Jiki Infinite off, just from getting enough value off of it. I think they returned a bunch of cards as well that let them reanimate their Kiki Jiki combo, as well as making a bunch of squirrels. It was just dreadful, James. Dreadful.
Yeah. And it's like Magic's already a high variance game, right? Like just the action of drawing cards off the top of your deck makes Magic a very high variance game. You don't need to artificially introduce more variance with stuff like dice rolling, in my opinion. I think it's kind of nonsense. So I'm on board with that. Minsk and Boo is listed as a banned card. Yeah, that card's...
I would agree with it.
That card is not that fun.
Yeah, it's not fun, and like it's almost power. Like it's kind of where we are with like... Yeah, I would say that for only the most powerful cubes.
Yeah, for sure. It's is amongst the least interesting ways to win a game, right? It's just I had a slightly early Minsk and Boo. You couldn't immediately answer it, so you died.
I guess it does it takes all the boxes of power because it's a card you take no matter what you're doing.
I mean, the only thing that makes it not, to me, like you do have to be able to make red and green mana, right? That is a thing.
That is true, but if in this cube, if in pack 3 I see a Minsk and Boo and I'm not in the colors, I think I hate draft it, James, because I'm a bitter bastard.
Depends who I'm passing to, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, well, but like, if it is a card that you think is so powerful, maybe I wouldn't hate draft it because I'm a sucker for like, there's a synergy card, I'll take that. That's what I would do, and then lose to the person who takes the Minsk and Boo. But like, there is a world where kind of like you remove it for the greater good. But let's keep it going. Like another thing that they have put as in their ban list is zero quip artifacts, like especially zero equip equipment, and that's because we do have a Nadu in here. I think I'm on board with this from a power level point of view. Like I'm still full on the Nadu train in my cube. I have a Shuko and a Lightning Greaves. Part of that is the 540 thing of it hasn't bulldozed people every cube. It hasn't basically we added Nadu and it was really fun and did very well, but didn't win, but did very well in the first kind of like 5 or 6 cubes. And like the last 3 or 4, it hasn't actually shown up as much. So maybe people have kind of forgotten that Nadu can train rate my cube. But it is something I could see, like if I have another couple of people coming to me being like saying that wasn't that fun, or for the power level of my cube it's too strong, then that is a nice way of toning it down while still having the cool Nadu stuff, but just toning it down a little bit so that you don't have that broken environment. I could see myself doing this at some point in the future. Like what they have instead of Shuko and Lightning Greaves, they have Lava Spur boots. It's pretty hot. They have Shadow Spear, but then they also have like I think
Sylvan Safekeepers in there as well, right? That's nice. Very powerful with Nadu. But then there's also just the good value stuff, right? There's Bristly Bill. There's even, like you have a Mother of Runes and a Nadu. It's really powerful. I think Nadu's still a very high pick in this cube. But yeah, it's just not a combo-y card. It's a value card.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So it's, as we mentioned, they still have Nadu. We've also mentioned they do have Broadside Bombardiers and Gut. I do think these are some of the strongest things that you can be doing in cubes nowadays. We have touched on it, and it's the one card from a single card point of view I could consider being too strong in this cube, and that is the 4th Aerlingus. The lands, meaning it's not free to splash off of like your non-Boros deck, is maybe the nice check there, but just from a single card point of view, I think like everything else we've like said could be too strong. So like Broadside, Gut, and like Nadu, they all need something else to work. It's like A plus another thing is good. Like you can just win a game with a 4th Aerlingus. So that's the one card from a power level point of view I think might be a bit too high. James, what do you think?
If I was designing this cube, would I put it in? Maybe not. But my inclination with stuff like this is, if you're unsure, like put it in and see how people feel about it. Because it's not like a super expensive card or anything, right? I would say, yeah, put it in, play it for a few drafts. If everyone's like, this is kind of miserable, like I would suspect with a card like that, there will come a point where your play group is like, yo, we've been 4th Aerlingus enough and we're kind of sick of it. And great, take it out at that point. It doesn't necessarily mean it was a mistake to add it in the first place. Like,
no, I agree with that.
Some cards are fun to have around for a bit. And then everyone's kind of over it, at a certain point. Like I think you had that experience a bit with initiative creatures in your cube, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think,
and we've done episodes on initiative and Nadu and talked to the moon about 4th. Like, these are very cool, very powerful cards, and to an extent, like if they found a balance in their cube where these are all fine, then that's really nice. For me, I couldn't find that balance, so I end up cutting down the power level of my cube for the first time. I kind of was very much pushing. I always like adding more things to try and push things up, basically. But one of the reasons I was specifically mentioning 4th is that they do list the most winning strategies as Boros aggro, 3-color control. You then have Golgari removal, and actually green base ramp is really nice to see on one of the top winning decks. Just a quick aside, mono green, James, it's back. I love that. But just like those top 2, like Boros aggro and 3-color control, those do seem like 4th Aerlingus decks, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, I think that's certainly true. Even green-based ramp can be a 4th Aerlingus deck.
True.
Golgari removals, this may be a bit tougher. But I mean, that doesn't mean they're only winning with 4th, right? But that is certainly true. But certainly Boros just looks pretty pushed to me. Like, we're not really missing any of the most powerful Boros cards, except for the initiative creatures, right? But yeah, I mean, I think on the whole, I'd say this cube looks very balanced. But yeah, it would make sense to me that both Boros aggro, mono white aggro, and mono red aggro would all win a lot. looking at the cube, that would seem like a reasonable place to me. I would guess in this cube, you're more likely to be white aggro splashing red or red aggro splashing white than straight up Boros aggro, because to be putting like a red 1-drops and white 1-drops in your deck next to each other, just like, here's my Ragavan, here's my Mother of Runes. You need a lot of dual lands, and because you're an aggro deck, you don't want to have a ton of tap lands, so it's so you need to get a lot of untapped dual lands, and that looks like a really tough thing to do in this cube. So I'd guess most of the Boros decks are one color splashing the other, but I mean, there's some very powerful cards to splash here, right? So that makes sense as the place to be.
No, exactly. And when it comes to balancing things, like when it comes to balancing something like Boros aggro, there are different ways you can go with it. Like, you can go the way of cutting a couple of cards, or you can go the way of powering up the other decks, and that's kind of it's not like one lever. That's kind of the point of a cube. This cube is 450 individual levers that you can adjust to push something up or pull something down. Like we are not saying cut some Boros aggro cards, but like we're just using it as an example in this cube because it is a winning strategy of like a way of adjusting stuff. Isn't just cut the cards from an archetype. It's give other archetypes game against them. So it could be like add a couple more board wipes, something like that, so that your more controlling decks have answers to your aggressive creatures. Like you could add a creature like Thing in the Ice, which is really good at kind of slowing down a game of Magic and giving a more slower, more mid-rangey deck some kind of some game against aggro decks if aggro is taking control of a cube.
Yeah, for sure. Just give other decks cards that line up well in that matchup. And then the time you really want to start looking at cuts is if people have all those tools in their deck and they look like they should be well set up against that deck, but it's still not a good matchup for them. That's probably when you want to look at like making cuts on power level. But I think starting with the approach of giving other people more tools and then only looking to cut the most powerful cards if that doesn't work is a pretty reasonable approach.
The other thing on cutting cards, just want to touch on is, and this isn't specific for this cube, but just in general, when you are looking to adjust stuff, just keeping an eye on what cards are consistently going last pick. Kind of, you've pinpointed maybe a couple in this cube, James, that just like, again, we're not saying cut these cards, but just keep an eye on them, talk with your playgroup afterwards, see if these cards are getting played, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, it's. I think we all like add cards speculatively to cubes, right? But it's like then need to keep an eye on them and see if they're working out. So, like cards, I would just from looking at this cube have doubts about is like Vengevine here looks kind of sketchy to me. Like you've got to be pretty committed to make that card good in general, to like milling it over for free because it's just not that good to cast. And it's kind of hard to return. So you need to have like a ton of self-mill or madness stuff or discard stuff. And I feel like there's not that much support here. And kind of Hogak in the same vein, although Hogak is a much more generically powerful card. So maybe you can kind of swing that one anyway. I suspect it won't see play a lot of the time, but maybe the occasional deck comes together where it's really good and it's worth keeping in. But yeah, there's some more general point about, as well as looking at what's winning, look at just like what cards are not seeing play, because those are just dead slots, right? And that's an opportunity for you to add something new and cool.
Talking of new and cool, there's a couple of cards in here that I have not cubed with yet that I did kind of want to shout out. This is definitely one that we missed on our set review. Oh, it's from Modern Horizons 3 Commander. That would be why. Actually, no, we did fire.
I don't think anyone could criticize us for not doing enough Modern Horizons set reviews.
Okay. But I do think this is a cool card. Let's talk about Mutated Cultist. This one is not one I'd seen before. Saying that, it might have actually been in the deck that I own, but let's go with I'd never seen it before. Mutated Cultist is 2 in the black for a 1/3 creature Eldrazi horror with Devoid. And when you cast this spell, remove all counters from up to 1 target permanent or opponent. The next spell you cast this turn costs 1 generic less to cast for each counter removed this way, and it also has Death Touch. I am right in thinking, James, this is a way of triggering Dark Depths, yeah?
Yeah, it's a depths piece.
That's kind of cool. But it's a depths piece that also makes your Emrakul cost like 5 or 3 or 5 mana afterwards. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
That's kind of hard.
Yeah, just your next spell costs 10 less. That's sick. That might be somewhat Winmore trying to be the I make my 2020 and now I have an Emrakul. But I think it's not a bad card anyway, but because it also kills a planeswalker, right? That's a pretty big deal. 1/3 Death Touch, I mean, that's not good, but it's occasionally you'll be getting beaten down, you'll cast this and it will block something, and that's fine. As
a body, it's nicely annoying, but yeah, you are mainly here for that ability, which I think is I do kind of like it. Like they don't have the battle in here, which can flip over, but that could also be a nice little thing with this, the battle that flips into like an 8/7 or something like that, like another the other piece we were using with Vampire Hexmage. But yeah, I had not seen Mutated Cultist before. I think that's quite a hot bit of tech. I might try that in the Treat Yourself. Also, one other one that I really like, I've mainly played this more in Commander, but I could see it doing work, is Rise and Shine. So this is for the artifact deck, which is kind of blue-based in this cube. It's 1 blue for a sorcery. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature. Put 4+1 counters on each artifact that became a creature this way. But it has Overload for 4 blue. I quite like this. This is quite neat. Like, worst case, it turns your treasure into a 4/4, but it does have like the kind of overrunny tech, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's like a Tezzeret Ultimate, right? But but you get it right away. The challenge with this card is you need to be going wide with non-creature artifacts, right? So you're
it's the Cyberdrive Awakener style of text.
Right, exactly. So it's your like Third Path Iconoclasts or Saheeli's or whatever, which is often a easy way to go wide with artifacts and cube. Doesn't work for this, but something like Chrome Host Seed Shark is really good here. Or or just making a ton of treasures or food or blood or whatever it might be. There's so many cards in Magic at this point. Just spit out some disposable artifacts. So literally every card at this point. This is a nice bit of track. It seems like a nice I win button for the artifact deck.
No, that's cool. And then a card that so this cube does have the Is It Spells deck that I've struggled for ages to make work in my cube, just primarily because players take the lightning bolts and the ponders, which kind of makes it a bit trickier. But they're running Slick Shot Show Off, which is a card I really like. I've really had a lot of fun with this in the Auto Battler that we played a bunch of times, in like the 3-hand deck type thing, where it's like this Pump Spell Berserk is sick. But I was glad to see this one because this is an incredibly cool and awesome Magic card that I want to it's the kind of card I want to see work in cube, similar to like Dreadhorde Arcanist. Like, I want these cards to be good in a cube environment, but just they haven't worked in mine yet, so it's nice to see them here. Was there anything that stood out to you, James?
Yeah, I like the shelf. I think I see it much more as a aggressive burn card than like a Dreadhorde Arcanist, which is like a accumulate value sort of spells payoff, right? I see the show off as like, I want it in my deck with Fire Blast and Char, you know?
That's
like maybe I have a couple of blue cards in there too, but I see it very much as being about killing my opponent because it has the haste, right? Is its big selling point to me. I found actually when I have played for that card in Cube, I found you plotting it is surprisingly real.
Really? Okay.
Because you don't care about getting in for 1 that much, right? So most of the time. And often, if your opponent has left up mana so they can have a removal spell up, on turn 2, being able to plot this instead of casting it, waste their mana, and then the next turn you cast this, play some spells, and get in for a ton of damage right away with they've tapped, or on a turn where they've tapped out for something. I found that to be really good because in those burn decks, right, it's often about, it's not so much about trading my creatures in an advantageous way. It's about getting damage out of my creature before they have killed it. And that plot allows you to cast this and non-creature spells in the same turn when your opponent's defenses are down, and sort of guarantee that you're getting, like, if you cast 2 spells, right, you're getting 5 points of damage out of this creature, and then they have to kill it. That's a really big deal. That's so much better than you tapped out for it on turn 2, got in for 1 hit, and then they shocked it, you know? So yeah, I like that card. Other cool ones, I think, the Maha, I hate the name of this card. I don't understand. Maha, it's Feathers Knight.
Do a Alan Partridge. Maha! No. Sorry,
yeah, maybe that's it. I don't know. It doesn't look like it's meant to be an Alan Partridge tribute card, but maybe it is. But this is the 3/black 6/5 legendary creature elemental bird with flying, trample, ward, discard a card, and creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. I think this card's pretty cool. Like, black doesn't get a ton of just like big tap out threats, right? Like, they tend to be more the getting value right away rather than this sort of big threat that will just win the game if it sits in play for a turn or 2. This is super big, but that ward is huge, right? Because it kind of negates the downside of 5-drops in general, especially 5-drops that don't have an ETB effect, but you they just trade really badly into removal. The ward helps a lot there. I think it would be really cool. I don't have a specific card in mind, but if we could have some sort of a deal 1 to all of your opponent's creatures to combine with this, I think that would be quite nice. Chainwhirler is a bit hard to cast, but maybe there's I don't know if there's a good value one. I'd have to think about it. Maybe Plague Engineer. Plague Engineer is powerful.
That's quite hot. That's hot. Yeah, I mean, it's better than just like Infest, I guess. Just like give a
it's got to be something that's like actually a real card outside of this, right? But yeah, maybe Plague Engineer is good. I think that could be a nice little way to maximize that ability. Yeah, there's a lot of cool cards in this cube. The Rad Stag I like as well. That's the green 3-drop where when you evolve it, you make a copy of it.
That is a cool one. I do like that card. Yeah.
Yeah, I've not really got to play with it much yet, but I like the idea of it. It seems very cool.
Sweet. All right, yeah, we're kind of coming to the end, but I thought we'd just end with, again, like, we are both, I think, fair to say, kind of like quite high on how this cube has been put together. It seems like, yeah, as you mentioned a bunch of times, there's been a lot of care to get to this point, and it does seem really fun, and it does seem very well balanced. But as I've mentioned, I like adding cards to my cube, so I am going to make some suggestions on what could be added to this. Just a couple of easy, quick ones, I think, just off the bat. Like James has already mentioned bonuses there, which I think would be a great include. But they're just like individual cards. So because we already have some of the combo pieces already there, I'd be tempted to add Goblin Bombardment, because I just really love this card. I think it's very good and very efficient, and like it's definitely the right power level for this type of cube. And obviously, it does go infinite with like any kind of sack based combo. So like the Gravecrawler, Warren Soul Trader stuff, it can be a sack outlet in that. Like it doesn't like that's pretty hot. And then it does also open you up to maybe swapping something like a Blood-Soaked Champion for Forsaken Miner, which then you can start doing some combo stuff with, because that's the one that comes back if you commit a crime. Hitting people in the face with a Goblin Bombardment is committing a crime. That's a nice little interaction there. I like that. Could be just one nice little swap, or a little ad that kind of just makes that deck a little bit hotter.
Yeah, I like that idea. The Miner's really sick with Yawgmoth as well, which we already have in. Yeah, I like that idea a lot. The one I quite liked the idea of was Dak Faden, which I think is just a really cool card anyway. But I specifically like it here because we have like a Hull Breacher and the other draw punishers in the cube, but no wheels. And I'm down with that. Like I can see Hull Breacher wheel is kind of miserable, and we're not spending all the money on wheels anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Hull Breacher to me is a lot less cool as a card if we don't have anything proactive to do with it. Like, it's not a bad card. Like, anyone who's had their brainstorm Hull Breacher will tell you don't need the wheel to make Hull Breacher good. But to me, if all it is doing is like punishing other people's draw spells, it's not that fun because it's just either it's great against some people, it's great when you get people, but then it has no text in the other matchups, and that's not that fun to me. Whereas Dak Faden, it gives you like a nice, like not busted proactive thing to do with that stuff, like flash in my Hull Breacher end of your turn, untap Dak, you discard 2 cards, I get 2 treasures, is like
pretty cool.
Really powerful synergy,
like
but not busted. And Dak Faden's also just a great card. So yeah, I think that might fit quite well here and kind of fill a little bit of a gap.
That's kind of odd. A couple of other just kind of bread and butter cards that I think could do quite well. Like I've just generally been, I take Bauble, like Urza's Bauble and Mishra's Bauble quite highly because they just go in so many decks. Like they're not just artifact decks. Like these are both the 0 mana Baubles that effectively you can sack them to do a thing, and the end result is you draw a card. I think these are just fantastic bread and butter cards. Like they don't just go in artifact decks. I run these in aggro decks. Like these are what kind of let you run 16 lands in an aggro deck because it's just a nice bit of free filtering on top of going in the artifact decks. But also because we have Tarmogoyf, because we have Pyrogoyf, because we have Barrogoyf and Nethergoyf. They're just artifacts that put themselves into the bin, which I think is quite nice and quite like it's almost free to include. Like it's not free from they need a slot to go in the queue, but in a deck, I think they just really make some decks really hum and sing. And in a similar vein to those, I would also probably consider Pyrite Spellbomb. I know we spoke about it, I think, a bunch on the last episode of just like being a good way of just synergizing a bit with some of your archetypes because we have artifacts in here. And because we have that delirium stuff, just swapping, like, I know it's not as good as something like Incinerate, or actually, I think swapping it for a Play with Fire, which is in, like, that's a 1 mana shock that if a player was dealt damage, you scry 1. I think I'd be fine swapping Play with Fire for a Pyrite Spellbomb, personally. It's a bit more mana intensive to kind of get going, but I think it just will bring things together a bit nicer, if that makes sense. I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like that switch. Just has more synergies in more decks, and the baubles certainly seem good. Like, honestly, there's like, it's one of those cards where you need a little bit of synergy to play it, but it's also almost difficult to draft a deck that doesn't have a little bit of synergy for baubles. Yeah, like even if you're an aggressive deck, right, they trigger your Slick Shot Show Off, they trigger your Dragon's Rage Channeler. But those cards just do a lot. And we do have a Tolarian Academy and a Nursa in the cube. So it seems like a good place for them.
Oh, yes.
Another gold card I thought would be a nice addition was Kaito Bane of Nightmares. That's the blue-black Planeswalker with ninjutsu. I've quite liked this card in my cube because... So we have in here already the... Fallen Shinobi, which is the Dimir 5/4, you ninjutsu it for 4 mana. Very powerful trigger when it hits them. And that's a cool card and you can build around it. But I feel having the second powerful ninjutsu cards makes blue-black ninjas feel a little bit more like a thing you can actually draft towards rather than just having the one ninja to enable. If you have both of them, you're then at the point of making much more of an effort to include good, cheap, evasive creatures, good creatures with ETB effects that are powerful to return, that sort of stuff. It starts to make it feel like a bit more of a fleshed out package, having just that second payoff. And the card is just quite powerful on its own. I think it will see play in plenty of decks.
Yeah, I do like Kaito. I've been meaning to put it into one of my cubes. I do love ninjas. We should relook at that archetype at some point, James. And then because I think there is room in this cube, I do think there's room for a couple of packages. There's one in particular that I'm going to suggest just because it's probably my favorite thing to do in cube, and it's not Delirium and it's not Graveyard. Oh, it's sort of Graveyard based, but it's not. It's the Dream Halls package. So Dream Halls is the 5-mana enchantment where it is symmetrical, but don't worry about it. Any player can discard a card, and then they can cast a card from their hand that shares a color with it. But the package is effectively Dream Halls and Mizzix's Mastery. These are your ways of casting your spells for free. We do already have a Torrential Gearhulk in here, which goes great with a Magma Opus, which I think is a great Magic card, and could also have play in the Is It Spells deck. But then you kind of, to those you add Cruel Ultimatum, Inspired Ultimatum as just really busted, like top end spells you're going to be casting. And then I think there is room with that to add an Echo of Aeons, which is it's probably one of the cheaper wheels out there. I think it's about $15 or about €14, that kind of stuff. But like, it's a 6-mana draw 7, or with flashback for 2 and a blue to do the Wheel of Fortune type stuff, which I think to do the Time Twister style thing of each player shuffles their hand and grave it into their library, then draws 7. Like, I will be honest, the Dream Halls deck does get better with wheels, but like, I think there's enough of them in here already. Like, there's Sail into the West, which would be great. Or Sail into the West is already in the cube. That would be great with Dream Halls. It's just so much fun. Like, Dream Halls is like my favorite thing to show and tell in on turn 3. I know that doesn't sound the most optimal, but just do that and you just dump your hand, draw a bunch of cards. You really feel like you are playing powerful Magic, and it's big and it's swingy. And that would be my like. I think there is room for some packages in here, but like if I was going to add one, I think Dream Halls would be it, because it's not super expensive. Like I think Dream Halls is about £20 right now, which is actually I think the cheapest it's been for quite a while. But as a package, I think it's the most fun. Like it is. If I see a Dream Halls, I'm happy, and that would be my recommendation for a package ad anyway.
Yeah, Dream Halls are sick. It's a lot of fun. I guess the only downside to it in this cube is because we don't already have the wheels. Like, I think it can work without having like Wheel of Fortune, Time Twister and stuff, but it feels like we need to add slightly more cards that are basically just there for the Dream Halls deck.
That's fair, and there is a kind of like that is a bit antithesis to a lot of how this cube has been made. A lot of cards do tend to like look like they either have a place or they're very good, if that makes sense. I'm very much a Timmy when it comes to it, of like, oh, this card does something cool with this other card. Cool, in they go to my 540. Let's see if in 3 cubes someone does have something with them. I am quite guilty of that, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. The final card I wanted to flag, which I think would be a pretty good ad, is Elvish Reclaimer. So this is the 1 mana 1/2. You can pay 2 and tap and sack a land to go and get a land from your deck. Basically, the reason I would like this is we have quite a lot of the good land stuff, and I think specifically a lot of the we've got like a Ramanap, we've got the new Ice Till Excavator, we've got we've got a Crucible. I think we're quite good at stuff like recurring Batterskull and recurring Strip Mine and Wasteland. So I think just one more way to go and get your Strip Mine or go and get your Wasteland could be pretty good. And it also helps set up your Dark Depths Thespian stage stuff, which is in here. We have Crop Pot already, but I think just like a little bit more redundancy for that effect would be pretty good. Because it looks like that would often be the pain point to me, would be how you go and find the lands rather than recurring the lands.
Nice. But yeah, in general, I think we both, this is a really lovely cube, and I would love to see some of these cards, like some of the altars in person. I do see that there is a promo from Magic on Amsterdam last year, and I am currently looking at going again next year. They've announced next summer we're going back to Amsterdam. And if I go, my plan is to spend as much of it as cubing as possible. So if you're looking for an 8th, hook me up. Maybe James up too. See how it goes. All right. So that's the end of our main topic. But let's crack on. We have one final topic for today, and that's what have we been playing? And James, you've been playing quite a bit of Edge of Eternity's Limited, haven't you? Like, I had a really fun time at pre-release. I think the set's pretty fun. I think the set's really fun. But kind of, what are your overall impressions of Edge of Eternity's as a draft format?
Yeah, I think it's played really well. The spacecraft, I guess, was the obvious new and exciting mechanic. I think it's been solid. The common ones aren't amazing, but there's some pretty good uncommon ones. You've got to build the right deck for them. I think they're currently slightly overplayed because people just put them in decks where they don't belong. But I think in the right deck, spacecraft play really well. I think the format, I think it will eventually be a fairly balanced format, but at this stage, people haven't quite figured out what the best cards are. And
Really?
I think green specifically is still really underdrafted. Like the green commons are just really, really powerful in this set. There's I think they just line up very well. I think a lot of what this draft format is about is stats, and just the way the cards line up against each other, I found it to be much better to be the guy playing the 5/5s than the guy trying to kill all the 5/5s. And
Right, okay.
yeah, I think green does a really good job at that. And can play in quite a lot of different ways as well, actually. But I think there's just a few green commons that are a bit underrated, like especially the cheap ones that make landers, and then you ramp with your landers, and then you get to play the expensive ones, which are also great. Yeah, like specifically, for example, Galactic Wayfarer, which is the 2 and a green for a 3/3 make a lander. I think that's just the best common in the set. I don't think it's particularly close. Like, is 3/3, I'd argue, in a lot of green decks, this is about on par with like 3/3 draw a card. And 3-mana 3/3 draw a card is way better than you get for a common, right? Like when you play that on 3, and then the next turn you get to crack your lander and then get up accelerates immediately, it's really powerful.
Yeah, I had that at pre-release, and most of the time it worked out to be exactly the same as my white rare that just has the same mana and stats.
Yeah.
That seems very strong.
Yeah, no, I think green just pairs really well with all the other colors as well. I think green-black doesn't work so well, but like green-red, green-white, green-blue, I think are all really strong places to be. With kind of similar game plans of accelerate with landers, play big stuff. I'd say blue-green, you tend to be a bit more like accelerate, draw a bunch of cards, and you're more of a like classic make lots of mana, draw lots of cards, blue-green ramp deck. Green-red, slightly more like accelerate, play a 5-drop slightly ahead of curve, a bit more aggressive, but pretty similar game plans, really. Like if you stick to the strong core of green creatures, you can't go that far wrong.
And then I guess what are the best non-green decks, James? Like if you're high on green, like what kind of comes close to it?
I've really liked blue-black. Blue-black is I'd say a fairly light artifact theme, but it's very much a sort of artifact-based control deck, which is an interesting place to be. And it has sort of a base, this of a good control deck in that black has probably the best removal spells in the format, and blue has great card draw, as you'd expect. I like the black removal a lot better than the red removal, actually, because the black removal lines up much better against other people casting large green creatures. So I think it's pretty well positioned.
There's a lot of really, really good ones as well. There's Gravkill is awesome art and a pretty solid card. There's Depressurize, 2 mana instant that can kill quite a lot of stuff. There's a bunch. There's Tragic Trajectory as well. One we were quite high out on the set review, and also Vote Out as well. I didn't want to. Yeah, I kind of forgot Convoke was in this set, but it is on that card.
Yeah. The Trajectory especially feels absurd because it's so easy to enable Void in this format. It's really powerful, and it actually plays really well with what blue-black is trying to do in terms of its synergies outside of just being a control deck. It has basically it has a lot of ways to sacrifice artifacts for value, and a ton of artifacts which are really good to sacrifice for value. So I think, for example, blue's best common is probably the Cryogen Relic, which is the like 1 the blue artifact, ETB, draw a card, you can sack it, and when it leaves play, you draw another card. And crucially, like, you don't have to sacrifice it to get the second card. You did to its own ability. You can sacrifice it to something else, and
nice.
that gives you there's a sort of Bone Splinters variant, for example, which lets you sack artifacts as well as creatures. Or there's like a 2/4 flyer, which when you attack, you can sack an artifact to draw a card. So if you have that, if you cast your Cryogen Relic, sack it to that thing, you kind of played essentially 2 mana to draw 3 cards, because you've got one on the way in, one on the way out, and then one from the black creature you attacked with. So that stuff all works really well, I think.
So with there being a bunch of very strong removal in black and such, like when we were talking in the set review about stations, the kind of my biggest fear about them was that they would get crewed and then immediately die because your opponent's seen it coming. Like that was generally my experience at pre-release anyway. Like I had, when I was ahead, they were great because it was just like, I just play my 3-drop and it can't attack, so I crew that, or I station it, that kind of stuff. But like, I think in all of pre-release, I animated it twice. One game I won, the other game they just killed it immediately. Was that like is that something you found to be true with stations, or have they played a bit better in limited than our impressions of how they would be in Cube?
Yeah, it's very much is an issue with stations. I basically almost all the ones I like have some sort of good enters the battlefield effect. Not that you don't care about stationing them, you very much do, but you're getting enough out of the enters the battlefield effect that even if they kill it once you've turned it into a creature, at least you've still got something out of your card, right? So, for example, there's the blue uncommons. There's a like 4 mana 4/4 flyer. If you station it up to like 8, but when it enters the battlefield, you draw 2, discard 1. So, and that plays really well because it's like an okay-ish card draw effects up front, and then once you turn it into a creature, you kind of don't care that much if they kill it because you already got cards out of it. If they have to use a removal spell on that, that's probably okay for you, right? Having said that, it's still not good enough if you don't station it, right? So you do need to put it in a deck with creatures that are good at stationing. So this is again, I think, another reason why the green creatures are really good is that they just have very high power. So the turn you play your 5/5 and it's summoning sick, that's 5 station counters on your spaceship, right? And they play really well the green decks, I think, for that reason. Even like the card like looks pretty unassuming, but like the 2 and a green 4/2 when it ETBs or dies, you surveil 1. That I found to be quite good actually, just because it stations really well and gets you a better selection.
Yeah, I guess kind of warp does play into stationing a bit more in limited than we were thinking about with Cube. But I could see how in green it just being a bit more relevant, just because the creatures are beefier. The common and uncommon ones you're warping in, like there's the Germinating Worm, 5 mana 5/5 with warp for 1 and a green, ETBs gain 2 life. Like that's a pretty solid creature that you'll run as a curve topper, but it can station your station pretty easily, basically, when you warp it in early.
Yeah, very much so. Like you get to a turn where you have 2 mana you're not spending, you can just pay 2 mana, gain 2 life, 5 charge counters on my spaceship. Happy days.
Oh, nice. How have you found the fixing in this set, James? Like I definitely did well in the games I played by just having a deck that only had single mana pips in the 2 colored decks, in the 2 colors I was playing, and just curved out consistently. Like it doesn't seem like there isn't a great amount of fixing in this set. Like outside of landers, there doesn't seem a great amount of like fixing. But like on like lands and stuff anyway. There's no like common jewels or anything like that. How are you finding playing more than 2 colors in this set, James?
Yeah, I think it's very much not free. It's something you have to work for, and really only certain colors are going to be able to pull it off that well. But I have found base green splash a bunch of different stuff to be pretty viable. Because green has that density of good commons that make lander tokens. I've had a few pretty powerful a few decks that have played really well that have been basically have like 10, 11 forests, and then like 2 islands, 2 mountains, and a plains. And my landers are just going to go. I'm going to reliably have green on the first turn of every game, and my landers going to go and search out my other colors. So, like, a card I think is going way too late at the moment is Sammy's Curiosity. That's the single green for a sorcery. You gain 2 life and make a lander, which just curves well with itself, right? You cast it on turn 1, you crack the lander on turn 2. It's kind of like you Rampant Growth and gains 2 life. But that, if you have that sort of very solid, like 10, 11 green sources, that's like ideal fixing for this sort of deck, right? And then you just only need to play 1 or 2 of the other colors of basics. And the other thing which I think makes this quite powerful is that there's a nice little sub-theme in this set of cards that care about how many lands with different names you have. So probably the best one here is Survey McCann. So this is the 4 mana, 1/3 flying hexproof artifact creature. And you can pay 10 mana to sack it, deals 3 to any target, you draw 3 and gain 3 life. So really powerful activate ability, very expensive, but it costs X less to activate, where X is the number of differently named lands you control. So in a 2-color deck with no non-basics, this costs 8, it's not great. But if you're, say, a green deck splashing a bunch of other stuff, you might have 4 different types of basics in your deck. Later in the game, you've cracked a bunch of landers, so you've got each of those different sorts of basics. Then this sort of card gets really good. This theme also, incidentally, makes they have like a bonus sheet, but with just lands.
Yes, I didn't
makes them surprisingly relevant.
That's true. Yes.
I think I put an Eldrazi Temple in my deck the other day with no Eldrazi, just as a colorless land. Yeah. I wanted a land with a different name, and that was one. But yeah, I think I found the multicolor decks can work well if you're base green. I've not generally liked splashing if you're not base green. I wouldn't recommend like Esper, for example, as a place to be.
No, that tracks. Yeah. I think that does feel more like a regular. Like that's a nice place for like. I think that's the starting place for most sets. To be honest with you, the thing of it's a 2-color set. You can splash if you really try. Otherwise, like not all sets are like cards. We can't be treated that much.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. There was one card I wanted to touch on, James. We didn't talk about this during the set review, but and I don't think it's one for regular cube, but I think for slower cubes like my Treat Yourself cube, this is going to be a test because I opened it. And do you know what the Ouroboid does, James, or Ouroboid does?
Is that one that punts counters on everything?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It's 2 green for a 1/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put X +1 counters on each creature you control, where X is this creature's power. This card slaps. Like I went several turns where like I was able, or I did a few games where I played on turn 5, but then immediately was able to put a counter on it with the spare mana. So just my 3 creatures gain 2 power, then the next turn they gain 4 power. I do think it is too slow for most kind of like high powered or tuned cubes, but in a cube where you're able to play a 4-drop that you need to untap with for it to be good, I think this is incredible. It's very messed up. It escalates very quickly, James.
Yeah. And even if they do kill it on their turn, like if you weren't wide enough, you still got some counters, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a disaster if you cast it and they just have lightning bolt right then. But I think it seems worth testing for sure.
Oh, definitely. If I'm honest, I like it more that it doesn't, because it doesn't have ward. It is a god.
Yes.
It's a god honest 4-mana 1/3, and I love that.
Yeah, more of that, please.
Proper stats. Fantastic. All right, so that's gonna do it for today. Thank you all very much for listening. James, pleasure as always. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. And thank you to Piotr and Janusz for Piotr for sending in the list, and Janusz for the cube list. Looks very cool.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you very much to both of you. And I guess one thing we forgot to mention at the start was that this was meant to be a birthday present. I'm assuming the fact that we're recording this 8 months after we got the email that we have missed your birthday, Janusz. So apologies for that.
Or if anything, we're early for Janusz's next birthday.
We'll go with that. We'll go with that. Yeah. Piotr, don't let him listen to this episode until January. Exactly. Marvelous. But anyway, that's going to do it from today. Do make sure you give the podcast a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever positive affirmation your podcast platform lets you do. Please do it. Tell a friend. Greatly helps us out. Helps us do more cool, interesting things. But until next time, it's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.